Hey everyone, it's the week start news jump on the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I am Anthony Cosenza, happy to be with you, whether it's you're enjoying your lunch, you're enjoying a work break, breakfast, wherever you may be joining us and listening to us. Appreciate you tuning in to the program and getting you caught up on all things Bengals news and news around the NFL as well. So we're going to get right to it in just a second. In case you are new to either this episode or this program, again, we've done this for the past few weeks now. We start the week with a brief episode on only the Cincy Jungle Facebook page and the YouTube channel. So if you like these, you got to make sure that you subscribe to this channel on YouTube. There's a little subscribe button somewhere around here if you're joining us YouTube. And then, of course, you'll also need to like and follow the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. So get that going so we can be a part of your week. We'll get you started. We do these episodes. They are about 15, 20 minutes, get you going, running you through the news and notes that occurred, sometime in last week, the weekend, and then obviously some headlines this week. And then John Sheeran and I, my co-host, we do a longer episode on Wednesday, talk about a lot of different things, analyze a lot of different things. And then on Fridays, we do the listener questions live where we field your questions and answer those. So that's, in case you're new to the program, that's kind of the setup of what we do. You can get these shows on the two platforms I already mentioned, YouTube and the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. And you can get the show as well, the audio versions of the show, on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, Megaphone, iHeartRadio, really wherever you get your audio podcast. So let's get to it. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share a couple of different things, both some stuff I've found on Twitter that you all may find interesting, as well as a Cincy Jungle post with a number of links that have Bengals news. So let's start there. You should be seeing my screen here. It is the Bengals news page, adding experience. You can see the Brandon Allen signing. So we talked about that a little bit last week when we took the air, that the Bengals were sniffing around and ultimately signed Brandon Allen, a veteran backup quarterback. I use the term veteran loosely. He's only been in the league a few years. You can see the 6th-round pick by Jacksonville in 2016, and he's kind of bounced around to a number of different teams. Obviously, there's the connection with the Rams there with Zach Taylor. So Zach Taylor is obviously familiar with Brandon Allen and is comfortable with him, adding him to the quarterback room. So that now has Joe Burrow, Brandon Allen. It has Jake Dolegala as well as Ryan Finley. Finley started 3 games last year to not great results, but the Bengals are adding. They did add Brandon Allen to their training camp roster. They have been making some moves. They did also add a kicker, Tristan Vizcaino, a guy who was with them last year. The Bengals had to let go of a few guys, a couple of undrafted guys, as well as Ryan Glasgow last week. As you remember, he failed his physical. So they're kind of making some moves here and there to get to 80 players as they're at that training camp deadline, which is coming up in about a week or so, that they will need to get down to 80. So they're kind of moving and shaking, doing some different things. Also, just to let you guys know, I'm gonna switch screens here. The Bengals did sign all of their draft picks. All of their draft picks are signed. T. Higgins and Joe Burrow also signed their rookie deals, along with every other Bengals rookie. They signed their rookie deal. Here's a little picture of Joe Burrow from his Instagram, from @FoJoe on Twitter. But this is a picture of Joe Burrow on his Instagram signing his contract. And he said, "I signed a paper today." So pretty cool picture there. Obviously, it's a Bengals workout gear and whatnot. But that was, a couple of days ago. But in case you have not heard, all Bengals rookies have signed, and they are under contract for 2020. I know there's been a lot of stress and some conjecture about all kinds of different stuff, however wild that conjecture may be, but all of the Bengals rookies are indeed signed. So in case you hadn't heard, they're all signed there. T. Higgins and Joe Burrow were the last two to sign. I want to say this here. You can see here, speaking of the rookies, Marcus Bailey, a guy who had a knee injury last year, and that's why he fell to the 7th round, a really talented kid. We actually had him on our program, the Orange and Black Insider, about a month and a half or so ago, maybe a little longer. Very, very likable and very just a talented kid that unfortunately, kind of like Rodney Anderson the year before, high talent, probably a day 2 type of talent guy. Just unfortunate that injuries played a role in him slipping to the 7th round, but he passed his physical. So that's good news. That would have really been an entanglement for the Bengals had he not passed his physical. So Marcus Bailey did pass his physical, as did Khalid Kareem, who also had a minor injury he was dealing with as well. They were both on the non-football injury list. We talked about that last week on the show. They call the non-football injury list, but they have football injuries. It's just a weird designation. But at any rate, both those guys passed their physicals, so that is good news for the Cincinnati Bengals as well. Going just down the line here, the Las Vegas Raiders are signing Bengals running back Jeremy Hill. Now, who knows exactly, what his roster chances are? You can see that the Raiders put Devontae Booker on the reserve COVID-19 list. And, we've talked about this before. That new list is also a little bit fluid in terms of, how that works, why guys are placed on there. Did they test positive? Were they around? Did they test negative, but were around some people and need to quarantine? It's a little bit of a fluid situation, and teams don't need to divulge as to why players or why they put a player, if they don't want to, on that COVID-19 reserve list. So the Raiders had an opening at tailback. They signed Jeremy Hill. Paul Gunther is obviously, even though he coaches the defensive side of the ball, there is a connection there. A lot of Raiders, the Raiders, the Bills, and the Bengals like to trade around their players and cycle through their players, it seems. So Jeremy Hill is headed to the Raiders after he went to the Patriots a couple of years ago, hurt his knee, and then I don't believe he played last year. So interesting that he was picked up, but he will be with the Raiders at least through training camp here. Two other things about the Cincinnati Bengals. The Domata Pico thing, for those of you kind of wondering why his name is popped up, well, Josh Tupou, a reserve defensive tackle and a guy that the Bengals were enormously sized guy, a player that the Bengals were hoping to really rely on this year. They signed him again in the offseason. They were hoping to rely on him as a rotational guy up front. They added DJ Reader. You bring back Josh Tupou. You have Ryan Glasgow, and all of a sudden Tupou opts out of the season because of the pandemic and the risk associated with that. So he is no longer going to play this season for the Cincinnati Bengals. And then I mentioned Glasgow earlier. He didn't pass his physical. So now the Bengals have this, what was a deep defensive line rotation that they had built up this offseason is now pretty low in terms of the cupboard being stocked. So Domata Pico's name has been thrown around a bit in terms of a guy they may bring back. There is mutual interest. And I said this on my Twitter account for those of you who follow me there. I find it interesting that Pico does want to come back to the Cincinnati Bengals, and interesting in a positive way. I find it interesting that he wants to come back to Cincinnati, even though the coach who drafted him, groomed him, gave him a lot of playing time, and gave him the opportunity to earn a couple of contracts with the Bengals, that being Marvin Lewis, is not here. And he still wants to come back and play in Cincinnati. So, that's a good sign in terms of how this team has treated a guy that has played for a really long time in this league. He would be entering his 15th season. He played 11 in Cincinnati, moved to Denver after the 11 years with the Bengals, and then last year was with the Ravens. So, a guy, he's not going to start. He's not going to start, but he would be a guy with some size, a guy who has been somewhat productive in the AFC North in the past, a guy they're familiar with, a guy that may be a rotational piece to help boost the losses of both Glasgow and Tupou. We'll see if Pico ends up signing with the Bengals. There are a couple of other names. The Raiders also let go of a former, this is kind of NFL news, I guess, but the Raiders let go of PJ Hall, a guy that was a second-round pick of a couple of years ago. So that was kind of shocking. And a guy, he's a little bit undersized. He's right around 300 pounds and about 6'1". He was a small school kid out of Sam Houston State, but that could be another option for the Bengals that just came on the waiver wire. And as you know, the Bengals being they had the 2-14 record last year, they are tops on the waiver wire claim line. So that's something to keep an eye on. One other thing before we bounce around to the NFL and some other things. Unfortunately, some sad news for those who have followed the Cincinnati Bengals for any period of time. Ricky Dixon, the former Bengals defensive back, he was on the '88 Super Bowl team. He won a national championship with Oklahoma under Barry Switzer. He passed away from ALS, which is also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. Passed away this weekend. Pretty sad story. I think he was only 50 or 51 years old. So very young. His family does attribute his disease to playing the game of football, accruing multiple concussions, and the years and years of football that he played that took a toll on him. And I don't recommend you watch, you look at some of this stuff, but you can find some clips. I think there was something on ESPN about a year or so ago. If you kind of see, you can see the deterioration of, the physical deterioration of Ricky Dixon, and it's pretty sad in terms of his last year and last months of his life. It's a pretty sad story. So, R.I.P. to Ricky Dixon, a guy who played with the Bengals, was a former first-round pick, and was on the '88 Super Bowl team. So sad news there, and our thoughts are with his family as they go through this tough time. Again, I'm Anthony Cosenza with Cincy Jungle and the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We're going to get to some more NFL news and notes in just a second. We've got a couple of other things to share on the Bengals front, so to speak. Good to see everybody. A lot of familiar names, a lot of new names that I'm seeing in both the live chats of the YouTube and Facebook pages. So good to see you all. Thanks for tuning in. And it's good to see that you guys do like. This has been a little bit of an experiment on our end in terms of giving you the news jump for the week. So it's good to see that you guys are enjoying this and getting some value out of it. We're going to keep doing this on Mondays to get you started, especially with, training camps opening up, the season around the corner, all of that. I do want to say this. There has not been, at least, not from the Bengals standpoint, there hasn't really been a uniform or a united announcement or game plan in terms of how teams plan to allow fans in the stadium. We do know that tailgating, at least at Cincinnati Bengals Stadium, is not going to be allowed around the stadium grounds. We will, by the way, in just a future episodes of our weekly episodes, we're going to get some of the guys that do some of these big tailgate events around Paul Brown Stadium. We're going to get them on the program to talk about what they're going to do to enhance the fan experience in this unprecedented offseason and unprecedented football season that's coming up here. So we'll give you some ideas from some of the people that put on those events. So we will be doing that, but going to be a unique year for sure. And we don't know exactly how many people are going to be let into the stadium. We think we know. We think we have an idea. Obviously, it's going to be mostly season ticket holders, that sort of thing. So we'll definitely keep you updated as we know more on that. I'm going to just share one other thing that is Bengals related, and we'll move on to kind of both Bengals and NFL news coming up here. I want to share this. This is from Joe Mixon's Twitter account. Got real life big decisions to make. So this can be taken a number of different ways. And Joe, if you follow Joe Mixon on Twitter, which I recommend you do, Joe is a guy who really uses the platform, I guess, in the way it was originally intended, which is just, hey, I have this, I'm just thinking out loud. Because that's kind of what Twitter's about, right? I mean, it's sharing news and all that kind of stuff, of course, but a lot of times when you have a personal account, it's just kind of, hey, I've got this thought and I just want to share it out there. Sometimes it backfires on people, sometimes it doesn't, but This seems to me that this was just kind of an out loud thought by him. Now, you could take this probably one of two ways, or one of three ways, I guess. It has nothing to do with football, and maybe he's buying a house or a car or helping out his family, or just something that has nothing to do with football. Or in terms of football, you have players that are opting out of the season. Is Joe Mixon planning to opt out of the season? I don't think so, especially when he's in a contract year and looking to get a new contract. But that is potentially, if he's seeing his colleagues opt out and some people maybe he talks to, maybe that is something, maybe he has people at risk in his family or inner circle of friends. I don't know, but that's one way to take this. Another way to take it is he's been offered a deal by the Cincinnati Bengals, a long-term deal that he is mulling over. We do know that the Bengals are working to try and get Joe Mixon signed to a long-term deal. What that looks like, when that will be, we don't know, but the Bengals have said they do want to try and get this done. They've put that through the beat writers, and that's been relayed to us. The Bengals also usually like to use the summer months in training camp. They've done this so many times to sign their core players to long-time extensions in their final year before they're set to hit free agency. They like to get that done ahead of time for who they deem are their core players. So if there is going to be a contract to be signed, it's probably going to be this summer for Joe Mixon. I don't expect it to go into next year. And if it does, he may not return to the Bengals. But it sounds like both parties want to make it happen. Interestingly enough, a response to that tweet was by Sean Williams, and he kind of said, "Sign on the dotted line, bro," or something like that. So, I don't know if that's alluding to a contract being offered, but we'll see. Moving on to a little bit of Bengals / NFL news, I'm going to share something else. This is just kind of a fun one. As everybody in the Bengals world knows, the Bengals have moved on from Andy Dalton to Joe Burrow. And by the way, on Twitter, Lindsay OK, she's a pretty interesting follow, by the way. She's pretty entertaining, has a very strong Ravens bias, but talks a lot about the NFL and the AFC North. But she posted this picture and just said, "Okay, this is weird. Seeing Andy Dalton in a Cowboys jersey. It is weird. A little different to see. We got our first look at that yesterday. So interesting is an understatement when you look at Andy Dalton in a Cowboys uniform. But hey, good for him. He landed somewhere. He's back home in Texas, and it worked out for all parties. If the Bengals were able to deal him for some picks, that would have been nice. Didn't happen, but they've moved on. They've got their new franchise quarterback, and Andy Dalton is in a good situation in Dallas as well. So, but just a first look at Andy Dalton in a Cowboys uniform, it kind of grabs the attention a little bit in a different way. Not something you normally see. So here are a couple of other headlines around the league. I mentioned about the Raiders releasing a former second-round pick defensive lineman. That could be something the Bengals keep an eye on, as I mentioned, they lost 2 defensive tackles last week, one by opting out of the season and the other by failing a physical. One other player that's really could be on the other side of the ball that could be of interest to the Cincinnati Bengals is a former Jets guard, Brian Winters. He is 29 years old. He was, you can see here, as a 3rd-round selection by the Jets back in 2013. So he's been in the league for a while. He's been a productive player. Unfortunately, he was injured last year and landed on IR. So the Jets wanted to clear some cap space. That could be a guy. He is a true right guard. So, right now the Bengals are set to have, apparently, Xavier Su'a-Filo be their starting right guard, maybe have a competition of some sort at left guard. Well, what's interesting is Su'a-Filo has been a career left guard, barely played any snaps at right guard in the NFL. So this would be a move if you do go after a Brian Winters and maybe bring him in. This would be a move where you pull Su'a-Filo to the left side, which he is apparently more comfortable with and has been playing in the NFL far more than the right side. you plug in Brian Winters at right guard and go from there. Obviously, a move like this would throw a lot of question marks to a number of different guys like Hakeem Adeniji and Billy Price and, all kinds of different players that are vying for a starting spot this year. But if you can make an upgrade, make an upgrade. And we've talked about this on the Orange and Black Insider, the weekly show. I would suspect that the Bengals would at least show some interest, not necessarily in Winters per se, but there's going to be teams, there will be teams that will be releasing players like this around final cutdown day. And, these are the type of things where the Bengals are, when they are at the top of the waiver wire claim list and they see veterans being released to free agency, they've got a little space still to work with in terms of salary cap. So these are the types of players they may sniff around. We'll see. There's been, once a lot of Bengals fans got a hold of this Brian Winters news, their eyes kind of opened up a little bit. We'll see, though. Again, the Cincinnati Bengals have told us time and time again, really over the last 2 off seasons, even with the injuries last year, they like their offensive line makeup more than we do. So I don't know that they will be bringing in a guy like Winters. However, they do also like to collect a lot of guards. If you remember last year, they had a ton of guards, so many that when the tackles got hurt, they had longtime guards playing at the tackle spots. So I don't know. Brian Winters, though, a pretty solid veteran guy, battled some injuries. The Jets released him this week. A couple of interesting other pieces of news. Eagles coach Doug Peterson tests positive for COVID-19. He's asymptomatic, so he's not showing any symptoms, but is staying away from the team, and assistant head coach Deuce Staley is helping out with the on-site stuff. And then Gardner Minshew, also the supposed starting quarterback of the Jaguars, we think, since they got rid of Nick Foles to Chicago. We think that Gardner Minshew will be their starter, but he's on the reserve COVID-19 list. I mentioned earlier that we don't really know exactly what that means. We don't know if someone's really sick. We don't know if it's an asymptomatic situation. We don't know if it's a negative test, but they've been around people who have tested positive. And again, the teams don't really need to divulge all of the details as to why a player is on that list, but some pretty big names either testing positive or being placed on the COVID-19 list. And I'll tell you what, I think you're just going to keep hearing more and more about this, going forward. It's really about how teams deal with it, how players deal with it, and, how teams are able to hopefully manage and quell any particular outbreak within their respective teams. You saw what happened with the Marlins in the MLB. A lot of guys, tested positive for it. Now they've had to postpone games. It's getting pretty ugly. So that's obviously the NFL is trying to avoid a situation like that. So a couple of other pieces of news there from the NFL perspective. That's about going to do it for us for the news jump for the week. I am Anthony Cosenza with CincyJungle.com and the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We hope that you continue to join us on Mondays for the news such as we presented today. And we hope that you join us for our normal Wednesday, lengthier, more analytical show, opinionated show. And then, of course, we'll be doing listener questions live on Fridays as well, where you can call us, you can text us, you can email us, you can tweet us, and we get through a number of listener questions on the air, and we will do that how we can. So join us for that as well. Enjoy the rest of your week. Hopefully we helped you get your week started off right. We'll see you next Monday for the news. Hopefully we'll see you for our other podcast episodes as well. Again, you can get this show on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, Megaphone, iHeartRadio, really anywhere you get your audio podcasts. And then, of course, if you prefer the videos, you got to subscribe to our YouTube channel, or you can like the Cincy Jungle Facebook page to be tuning in for our shows as well. I recommend you do both. That way you get all the Cincy Jungle, all the Bengals news on the Facebook page, and then, of course, you get all of our podcast stuff on the YouTube channel. Thanks for your support. Thanks for joining us live. We'll see you next time.